Okay.
It's rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, guys. Welcome back to the Sweaty Palms podcast. I'm your host, Zoe Dillon. And today's guest is Ingo Stahl. Stahl or Stahl?
I'm drinking. Stahl in German, but
Okay.
I guess Stahl is...
And that gives away where he's from. He's from Germany, which is really exciting. This is the very first musician I have on the podcast that is from Europe and not within the US or based within the United States. So this is going to be a really cool perspective that we have not heard before. So let's get into it. How's it going, Ingo?
Good, yeah.
Yeah.
My last day in the US, so...
No.
But I had a great time.
What has been your favorite part of visiting the US this time around?
I think showing my mom the US because she came for the first time and she is 70 years old and she's really only been out of Europe once.
Wow.
Coming over with her, and we visited my sister that now lives in Brooklyn, actually, New York, showing her New York and then showing her Atlanta. Yeah, just seeing how she's taking it in, being so far away from home, and all the little things are a little different from, what people eat to how they say hi on the street or where they put their trash or, all these tiny things that you don't even think about when you live in the country. And I was really happy when we sat on the front porch and it was pretty loud and there was like all sorts of stuff, because this is it's a big city and stuff's happening. And Germans are very strict about noise and, what neighbors are allowed to do, how loud they can be. And she sat on the porch here and was like, I'm never going to explain again when our neighbors are too loud or anything, But in this way of my mind just opened up and I realized how different it can be wherever you are and that there's not just this range of acceptable that I was used to for the last 70 years. And it was cool because it just showed me what I hope traveling does to everyone is just opening their horizon and their mind and kind of seeing things differently and seeing their own life and their own place and their own country in a different perspective.
That's really beautiful. That should be encouraging to people who haven't traveled yet but want to.
Yes.
Definitely very eye-opening. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Just being able to travel around Europe, every country is a completely different way of life, which is really cool. And kind of what you mentioned, like, sure, it's for people who haven't been, it's all, everybody thinks Europe is kind of not smushed together, but every country is closer together. So you think there are a lot of similarities, but it's crazy how different it is when you go from one country to another, not only with language, but just, culture and everything.
Yeah.
Should we tell them how we know each other?
Sure.
Okay, or we can leave it out. They can just wonder forever and never know.
Sure, we should hint, and then it's like a little quiz, and at the end they have to post on your Instagram what they think, how we know each other.
That's a good idea. We're just going to leave it at that. So you'll have to listen throughout the interview, and if we accidentally slip up and say it, then you'll know. But if not, then you have to guess. That's a great idea, Ingo. All right. Well, anyway, can we start with your background and how did you get into music?
Sure. Well, I was just thinking of that song quote, music was my first love, the John Miles song. And I guess that's kind of sums it up. I was always really fascinated by music. I loved singing, listening to music as a 3-year-old with my sister. I have an older sister, in the car, wherever. And I really always loved it. My parents, I guess, wanted both my sister and me to play one instrument. So whenever we were 8 or 9, they were like, what instrument do you want to play? I originally wanted to play the trumpet. Ooh. But I couldn't because my lungs weren't developed enough. I was born really early. So they said okay, let's pick something else. And then the guitar came.
Yeah.
I played guitar since I'm 9 years old. Loved listening to pop music. I mean, I had a very classical teacher. It wasn't anything amazing. So I would say it was never the teachers or the learning that really motivate me to be in music, but just listening to it on the radio, my dad's vinyls and stuff. So I loved Elton John, Tracy Chapman, Sting, all these singer-songwriters in a way. And yeah, pretty early on, I knew I wanted to study music. And the only way to really study, because I wanted to learn everything I could about music, but then also I dreamed of being just a singer-songwriter, writing my own songs. I think I wrote my first song when I was 12. Really simple song, but it kind of showed the way. And so I decided to study jazz music in Cologne, Germany. And if you want to study music, you can really only do classical or jazz in Germany, at least. I don't know what it's here. I guess pop music study programs are more and more coming, and even my study program was called jazz, rock, pop, but it was still very much jazz, which was fun. But over the course of my studies, I focused very much on my own music, and my bachelor's concert was just my own songs.
Oh, nice. How long were you in the program?
A little longer than usual, because I ended up actually first being in the teacher's program. And in Germany, if you want to become a music teacher, you actually go to the same place as full-time professional musicians. So I started with that because it was easier to get in. It's a long story how I ended up in that. I don't know if that's super interesting.
You're welcome to share if you want.
Well, it's like after my high school, I really wanted to study music, but I knew they usually accept 1 or 2 people per year in the program. So a friend of mine was like, why don't you come to a little place called Oldenburg in Germany and just study in the teacher program there, and then you have another year to prepare for the auditions. And so that's what I ended up doing, which was in a way fine because I got, to move out of my parents' house and stuff, but it was also an awful program. I hated going to that school. I did math as my secondary subject, and so I was in between math studies and having 22.5 minute lessons with a teacher because they calculated super exact and stuff. So I hated it, and I just knew I wanted to get out of Oldenburg as quickly as I could. So the plan was to go to Cologne, but apply for the teacher's program again so that I had more chances of getting into that school and then switching within the school to the artist program. Gotcha. And that's exactly what I did. I did the teacher's program for 2 years, and then it was actually a lot of fun. I learned a lot, but then it got to the point where you realize, okay, I'm becoming a teacher, not a musician. And so I wanted to switch. I did 1 semester in a music academy in Helsinki, Finland. That was really fun.
Oh, nice.
And that was already the artist program, and then I came back and applied for the is it called the artist program? What do you say? It was an undergrad study program. It's just that the school was divided between the teacher program and then what I called artist program.
Okay, I would say artist program then, yeah.
So I was the lucky one that they took, and then I finished that. So all in all, to answer your question, I think 6 years from applying to the first study program to finishing my bachelor's, which is a long time. But
yeah. So you mentioned like musical influences you had growing up, like Bill Withers, or not Bill Withers. I read your Spotify thing, so that's why I thought of that. And I love Bill Withers too. But so you mentioned Elton John, Sting, and Tracy Chapman. What got you into listening to them? And I know you kind of mentioned your dad in your Spotify bio.
That was also my Spotify bio.
Okay, I did my research.
My dad had like a few vinyl records that he played again and again, and Bill Withers was one of them.
Yeah.
And I loved it too. Yeah, what got me into those specifically? I don't even know. I think, well, actually, no, that's not true. With Elton John, my sister gave me a greatest hits double album for my birthday when I must have been 13 or something like that. And at that point, I had already kind of taught myself how to play the piano a little bit, just in my free time. And I always loved working with my hearing. So I was always listening to songs, trying to figure out how to play them myself. And back then there was no internet, there was no guitar tabs or whatever. You just had to either buy these old school booklets of sheet music. They were written like classical music with like individual notes and everything, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't even read sheet music back then, like lead sheets, where you just have the chord symbols. So when I was 12 or 13, all I did was just listen to it and trying to play it, and I think that really trained my ear. And when I got the Elton John greatest hits, I basically fell in love with Rocket Man and Tiny Dancer, like as the first. Because I think, what's the famous one again? The super famous, It's a Little Bit Funny.
The feeling is...
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, hold on.
What is that?
I have to wait.
Your Song.
Yeah, yes. Your Song. That's
so that was, I think, the one I knew that was everywhere on the radio. But then Tiny Dancer was still kind of new to me, and Rocket Man, I think I'd never heard in my life.
That's a great
song. I just loved the production and the sound of everything. And then I figured out how to play the chords on the piano, and I loved that. And then I realized I'm not a tenor. I can't sing that high. So I had to change the key to, sing it. And it still sounded a little bit awful, I guess. But at least I tried. So yeah. And from then on, I was on an Elton John. I felt like the biggest Elton John fan for the music for the next 4 years, I think. I bought all the albums from the 70s. I listened to them all the time, played all the songs. Yeah, that was huge. And that really shaped me as, like, I think how I like to write songs, how I work with harmonies, melodies and everything.
So would you say he was your biggest influence at the time, or if you have one influence overall that has guided you, would you say him?
Yeah, there are a few musicians over my whole lifetime, but he was definitely the first and maybe even biggest influence, even though I wouldn't say you can hear that in my music very clearly, but that was maybe with like the first love, the first love is also the most intense. So that was my first musical love. Tracy Chapman was definitely also a big influence, and Jack Johnson, because they brought me to playing the steel string guitar, because all my childhood when I was having guitar lessons, it was classical guitar. So nylon strings and classical pieces. We played a little bit of Beatles songs and stuff, but I had never played a steel string guitar until I was 19. And I bought one and, realized that they sound completely different, and you can actually play pop music. And at that time, Jack Johnson just came out with the first album, was everywhere. And I played those songs and loved it. So those were probably really big influences. And then a little bit later in my studies, John Mayer. Took me a little bit to fall in love with the music, actually. I remember a few friends showing me one or two songs in the very beginning, and I was like, yeah, okay, but I don't know. And then a few weeks later, it happens actually quite often to me that it takes me a little bit, and then it's like, whoa, yeah, this is awesome. Nice. And then he was my hero for a while. So,
what would you describe your music as? Like, if you had to put it in a genre, or maybe like in one word, what would you say? Yeah,
well, if I had to say one word, I would really just say singer-songwriter, because I think it sums it up without really telling you anything. But I think that's important because, and I think, you had guests on the show that talked about it also, that the genre question is always, it always changes, and everyone also understands something completely different when they hear something, a specific genre. And I think it's really important to just let the artist play you a few songs, or at least one song, and then it's whatever it is to you, it is, And singer-songwriter, for me, is at the heart of it is that I'm a singer and I'm also writing my own songs, and I'm presenting them to you. And that can be just with my guitar, super stripped down, or it can be with a full band, because that also really changes how you would understand the genre. I can play the same song by myself, and you would probably say it's a folky acoustic singer-songwriter, and then I can play it with my band, and you would say it's kind of a indie pop act. So it's tricky to answer, but just saying singer-songwriter, maybe acoustic singer-songwriter. I think that.
What do you notice are the differences when you play by yourself versus when you play with your band? Like, how it feels when you play alone an acoustic gig versus when you play with your band?
It's very different, and both have very unique and great sides. When I play by myself, it's usually a more intimate setting to begin with. It's fewer people, smaller venues, and it can be a very beautiful, intimate evening spending with the audience, and you're really just telling them your story. I have these moments sometimes when I'm playing by myself in the middle of the song where my brain goes like, this is really weird. Everyone's quiet, and I'm just basically talking, I mean, I'm singing, but I'm still like, I'm just telling you something, and everyone's just listening. It's really weird. And I appreciate it a lot. I'm like, wow, I'm so grateful that everyone's just paying all this attention to me. It's a little awkward too, but nice. And then when I play with my full band, usually I don't feel like I'm as connected to my audience because they're a little further away, sometimes further down, because you're a little higher up on stage. But you get the feeling of being with other people, like you can share the whole experience with your band members. It's exhilarating to just kind of look at them while they're playing their solos, or you just communicating. And the whole I guess the intenseness of the event is bigger. The audience is louder, like everything's bigger, more cheerful. And that's really cool. There's a different high, I guess, to it.
Do you have a personal preference for which one you like, or is it different for different times? I know that's kind of like who's your favorite artist ever? It's like you don't have that answer. Just it's different.
And I think it's like with food, it's like I have a favorite food, but if I have to eat it every day, then at some point I really want something else. So no, I couldn't answer that. I lived in Copenhagen for a while and played only solo shows for years. And that was fun, but that was a lot of that. And then when I got back to Germany and I had a few shows where I could bring my whole band, that was wonderful. And then after that you play a solo show again, you're like, oh yeah, this is also really nice. So no, it's hard to answer.
Okay, why did you move to Copenhagen?
Well, I finished my studies in 2012, and I knew I wanted to leave Cologne as a city. Like it wasn't really the place I wanted to be. And my girlfriend at the time got a orchestra job in Copenhagen. So I was like, hey, I'll just move to Copenhagen for a few months, see, then we're closer together and I can see if I like the scene. Because I heard that there's a kind of active amateur, semi-professional singer-songwriter scene that's fun to be around. And I moved there and it was a lot of fun. There almost every day of the week there's a songwriter night where you can play, and I got booked relatively quickly to not just play on the open mic parts but really just play parts of the sets. I got a little hotel gig where I was doing background music, and I still had my band in Germany at the time, Last Bird we were called, and every 2 months or so I would travel to Hamburg and then be with them and play some shows. So it felt good at the time. Yeah, I guess it was.
How long were you living there for?
4.5 years.
Okay. This is just kind of a question that relates to your music, but it's just more about culture too. Cultural differences. Did you notice a big difference from when you were in Cologne versus when you were in Copenhagen versus when you were in Hamburg? Was it hard to adjust to living in Copenhagen if you didn't know Danish fluently? I know a lot of people in Europe do speak English, but it's still not like the native language of Denmark, obviously.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it is, even though I guess sometimes maybe from the outside, like from an US perspective, Europe is like everything's so close and everyone's so close together. But it's still, if you move to another country within Europe, you're a foreigner. It's
completely different
you're
culture.
very much. You have the same experience, I guess, than any foreigner moving to a new country. And I felt that. I mean, the program is kind of nice when you apply for not citizenship, but if you basically get your allowance to live in a country, they also give you free language classes, and they help you a little bit to fit in and try to make your way, making friends and stuff. But it's still the same as everywhere. You move and you're pretty lonely and it's hard to make friends. And Danes are very friendly when you first meet them, but somewhat closed off when it comes to more serious friendships. So in all those years, I barely had like really nice, deeper conversations with Danes. It was mainly other foreigners that were my friends.
That's interesting.
And that was cool. But and that also relates to music. All the gigs, the ways of finding your way into a club, maybe play a better paid gig. That was very difficult, hardly doable for me, even though I would feel like there were some people, some Danes in the music scene that really try to help me out. But it's a small country. There's already to begin with, not too many clubs overall, because Copenhagen is maybe one of the 2 bigger cities in Denmark, and that's it. And it's hard. I mean, as a musician, it's really hard to make a living in general, and then as a foreigner in Denmark, that was tough.
And just to put it into perspective for some people who've never been to Denmark, my sister dated a guy, and he said he was taking a trip to visit the other side of his country, and it was 45 minutes for him to drive to the other side of the country. So it's a really, really small country. So you can imagine from what Ingo's saying, like Copenhagen is the biggest city in Denmark, as opposed to the other one. That's still not very big. I think it's smaller. Would you say it's smaller than Atlanta, or around the same size?
Oh, it's way smaller.
Way smaller than Atlanta.
It's not even, there are not even 1 million people in Copenhagen.
Yeah, so
all of Denmark has less people than Metro Atlanta.
Yeah, that's insane. I've never been to Copenhagen, but my sister's lived in Aarhus, I think is how you pronounce it. Aarhus. And that we were in that city for a weekend, and it was pretty small there too, but really, really cool country, like Ingo said. When you decide to choose a language to sing in, and obviously you chose English from what you've posted on Spotify. What was the decision that made you want to do that?
Yeah.
As opposed to singing in German?
That's a good question. It's an interesting question, I guess, because I get that asked in Germany too, obviously. There is, for people who maybe have never heard any German music or German radio stations, it's divided. So there are a lot of Germans who sing in German, and then there are quite a lot of Germans who sing in English. And over the last 20, 30 years, there have been phases of what's more popular. So, well, maybe I'll come back to that later. But for me personally, the thing is, all the music I listened to when I was a kid basically was English. Everyone was British or American. And so for me, that wasn't even really a question until maybe at some point I realized, okay, yeah, they're not just children's songs that aren't German. There's also like real music that's also German. But all of the music I loved was in English. So that was just like the instrument that singers used to sing, you know? And I see it that way. If you change the language, you kind of change your instrument, because the language has very distinct features about what vowels and consonants it uses and how it sounds and how you can work with it and stuff. So for me, English was always set. The problem was only that I didn't know any English when I was 8 or 10 or 12 and I wrote the first song. So I would just make up sounds that sound like English, and that's how I would write my songs, you know, just like doing fantasy language that's somewhat English sounding to me, probably not for an English speaking person. And then later, as I knew a little bit of English, I would just kind of still use words and put words in there that are real, and then combine them with not existing sounds and words, and then just still keep making fantasy phrases and writing my music like that, because I liked the way that it sounded. And I guess I have to say, I was never looking at music from a very poetic standpoint to begin with. It was the music itself that fascinated me. So lyrics came later. I always wrote, and I'm still like that. I always write the music first, usually at least, and then I'm inspired by, you know, kind of some sounds I did, because I still do that now sometimes, that I write like that with fantasy English. And then I know what kind of vowels and sounds I like, and then I'm trying to write lyrics that incorporate that, but also make sense. And I love writing lyrics now. It's hard still for me. I think it's just difficult to write good lyrics. But
do you think you're at a disadvantage because English isn't your native language?
I'm sure I am, yes. I have to work harder, and I hope it's not standing in the way. I mean, that's the big but and the big fear when you decide as a German to really go with English for your music, because I don't want to be the guy who's singing songs and everyone who listens to it is like, it's really nice, but the lyrics kind of, you know, it's like either it sounds really bad the way I'm singing it, or they're too simple and too childlike.
Just from, sorry to interrupt, but just from my perspective, you're like completely fluent, like 110% fluent in English. So, and then when I listen to your music, I haven't run into that at all. I just think your lyrics are fantastic, and your speaking and everything. So just from my perspective,
Thank you. That's really nice. I appreciate it. Yeah. I mean, I guess sometimes it helps a little bit that it's music, because I'm sure throughout the interview, I made a number of mistakes and stuff, but with music, it's also poetry, so you get away with a little bit more. But there's also a flip side to it, because when you come up with something that's poetic but a little weird, and you're not a native speaker, a lot of times people will say, that's wrong. He's not a native speaker. Like he did a mistake there. Whereas if, you as an American would do the same thing, no one would be like, you don't know English. Like you made a mistake. It was like, oh, interesting. This sounds kind of weird. Yeah. But they must have meant it because they know what they're doing. Right. So I'm kind of caught in between proving that I know the language well and not make silly mistakes. But then if I want to do something unusual, how do I prove that I wanted that, Right. So it's a little bit of a fine line you always have to find, and that's also a little bit limiting sometimes in how weird your lyrics can be. But, right. But I have to get over it and just let go of what other people think, and and that's what I'm trying to do, and I think it works. We can just link them to this podcast and they can hear how wonderful you talk, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, he's fluent. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm an asshole. And that'll fix that problem real fast. You got some listeners,
going way back when you were talking about your musical influences and playing classical guitar and then transitioning to steel guitar, how was the transition on your fingers? I'm just curious because my friend played classical guitar and I played her guitar, and I was like, why didn't I start with this? Because my fingers when I first started with the steel strings killed me.
Yeah, that's true. I think that probably really helps, and that might be a reason why it's still so common for every guitar beginner to start with a classical guitar, at least when you go to music school, and I teach at a music school in Hamburg too. Usually they come with their first tiny classical guitar, and that's how you start. I don't think that's necessarily the good way to always go about it, because there are a lot of students that are 14 and they start and they bring their classical guitar, and I'm like, you want to do pop music, let's get a steel string, let's start right with that. But yeah, it might be harder on the fingers. I don't remember having lots of pain or anything like that, probably because it's been such a long time that I already played. But I mean, maybe a little bit, yeah. But the trick is also to change your strings often enough, and people don't do that. They play with their strings for like a year or two, and then they're like,
how often should you change them? Because it
really depends how often you play.
Okay.
And if there's anything in the where you have your guitar where they just rust by itself, because the strings will rust from the sweat of your fingers.
Okay.
They're going to get dirty, greasy, and they rust because they get wet every time you play.
Right. It's going to be especially bad for me.
So if you play a lot, there are people who change their strings every week. If you play somewhat a lot, I mean, there's been times where I changed them every 2, 3, 4 weeks. Wow. Some people do it every 6 months. I mean, I would say for someone who's just occasionally playing, or someone who, plays twice a week or something, you can probably leave them on for a year and then change them. But you should just look at them. That's the best thing to tell anyway. Just look at your strings. Go down one of the bass strings that has the metal around it, and then see if you see dark spots and like coloring. If you see that, then
it's time to change them.
Yeah.
Got it.
And that's harder on your finger because all these tiny rust particles kind of get under your skin and they rub it. They kind of break the skin, and that's what really hurts then playing the guitar. So changing your strings often
would help that.
Helps your fingers.
And then getting the calluses from, after playing.
From just doing it, a little bit every day.
I go in phases where I'll play for a long time and then I'll get the calluses and then I'll stop playing and then they'll go away and then I have to redo the process. So I just need to be consistent with it.
I feel you though. It happens to me too.
Okay, good. Well, not good. I'm sorry. We feel the same pain.
That's part of playing guitar.
Yeah. Did you find you've taken more inspiration from American culture and music or European, or is it a mix? And I know we've kind of already talked about what you grew up listening to and how you gravitated toward English singer-songwriters, but do you have any European influences or music that you really like, and has that pulled into how you play now at all? Well,
yeah, I have to say, I think for a long time I've been somewhat ignorant even where the people are from. Sometimes in Europe you have this phenomenon that maybe it seems weird for Americans, but like with English names and English artists, English sounding names, we don't know if they're English or American often, or Australian, they just sound, So Sting was someone that I didn't really know for a while where they're from when I was younger. And then Damien Rice was someone I really listened to. So there are a lot of British and Irish and Scottish artists that have influenced me. But that's really the region in Europe, usually the only one, because French music is usually French. They sing a lot in French, and same in Spain and stuff. So it's that UK region. Yeah.
I remember what I wanted to say earlier, because this reminds me of that. But just when you were talking about living in Copenhagen and how difficult it is to move to a new place, I can't even imagine adding on the fact of having to learn a completely different language and it being something that is like obviously very prevalent and you have to know. Because just thinking about when I moved from high school to college, I switched places just in Georgia. I had to completely start over, but at least I knew the language. I can't imagine having to deal with that, like moving somewhere new and then also being like, oh, I don't know what people are saying, like 95% of the time or whatever, because English is not the dominant language. And I definitely feel like maybe you would have like, obviously there are cultural differences just within the U.S. and when you go from the South to the North to the Midwest, all these things that you have to think about. But when you're a completely different country, that's a completely different culture, and you don't have at least one unifying factor of a common language.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, luckily Danes really speak English really well, so you get away with that. But I mean, at some point I had to take a waiter job too because it just wasn't enough money I could make with music alone, and I had to speak Danish all day. So that was definitely a challenge, but also fun. I mean, I like that. I like languages, but yeah, it's rough.
That just is a testament to how strong you are, though, because I mean, you did what you could do because you love music. So you took a waiter job and you spoke Danish and learned the language to submerge yourself and be a part of that culture. So that's just really cool. I am amazed by that. So I would like to do that one day, hopefully soon.
yeah. I mean, I guess it just, it wasn't all of it. It's not really, it's never planned. I think just things happen. And I really had the choice of leaving the country again and potentially, ending the relationship and everything, or just kind of making it work. So it helps if you have some pressure and you just need to do it. And, my first day was rough, but you get over it. And that's also cool. It gives you strength.
Yeah, definitely.
Because then you learn that you can do these kind of things and you'll get over it. So.
Right. You stick in, you don't give up. 4 years that's a long time. So that's really cool. Anyway, just thought,
thanks. Cool. I appreciate it. Yeah, you should do. You should find an experience like that now.
Yeah, one day I'll have to do it with Spanish because that's the only language I kind of sort of.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. When you moved to Hamburg, what was that transition like for you, going from Copenhagen, and what was it like getting back into the music scene? And can you explain or describe to me what the music scene is like in Hamburg?
It was a really nice transition, I have to say. I felt a little bad realizing, just because I think moving back to Germany, that was the point where I realized the most how difficult it was to be a foreigner, because I came back to Germany and suddenly everything was so much more easy. It also helped that Hamburg it's the second biggest city in Germany, and it's a big music scene, and I already had a lot of friends in that city because my former band was based in Hamburg. Plus, I'd been on this pretty famous pop workshop that happens every year for the last 30 years in Germany, and it's in Hamburg, where a lot of musicians all over Germany come together and form bands and meet and hang out for 6 weeks and just kind of, it's like a big summer camp in a way, but then it's all about music. You have lessons every day. You have band rooms where everyone can just jam. And a lot of famous German bands formed through that workshop. And I'd done that a few years before I moved back. So I came to Hamburg and there was a network of people, lots of opportunity. And I felt really bad because I just felt so much more for everyone who's living as a foreigner in any country, and they don't have the option to move back to their country, and they're still trying to make it because it's just so much harder. And anyway, so I appreciate it even more, and very quickly got the chance to play, support gigs and little shows here and there, and it kind of took off from there. For the first year especially, I was just really playing all over the place and doing a lot of cool stuff, so that was awesome.
Is there a favorite performance that you've had in your whole career? Is there one that you could think of that stands out?
I think my bachelor's concert was really nice because it was the end of my studies. It was only my own music. I had a somewhat big band, so not just, usually it's 3 other musicians. It's another guitarist, bassist, and a drummer. And that day I had an organ player and like a double bass, electric bass. Then I had like a violin. I had 2 background singers.
Oh, wow.
It was a really big setup. Plus the venue in Cologne is a really wonderful venue where the band is in the middle, and then all around 360 degrees is the audience. So, there's no one side where there's just backstage, and you feel like you're kind of hugged by the audience on all sides, and they're all are part of it. And that was a beautiful concert, and it was, so much fun to play. And then also really nice to see all the people coming out and supporting me.
That's awesome. I wish I could have been there, but we definitely did not know each other back then.
No, we did not. Yeah.
I wonder what you were doing, or what I was doing at the time that you were performing your concert.
It was 20. Wait, whoa!
What year?
Lost the time.
You said 20?
It was 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was 13.
Yeah.
So I was probably in middle school in class while you're performing.
Yeah.
Crazy.
True, exactly.
We haven't mentioned that you're an independent artist yet, but I'd love to talk about that. What does being an independent artist mean to you?
That's a tricky question.
Yeah.
I guess it kind of, the question is, did I choose to be an independent artist or not?
Yeah, that's maybe the better one.
But so I had my fair share of experiences with major labels, and they weren't very positive.
Gotcha.
So
Unfortunately, I hear that's the case for a lot of artists.
Yes. Some funny stories. I was actually almost part of a band. I was casted for an a cappella boy band.
What? How come I'm just hearing about this now?
Well, that was
Ingo.
kind of an interesting part of my life. So I got a phone call from this guy that I knew from my studies in Cologne, and he was a teacher there. So he was like, yeah, so I have this interesting thing. Warner Music wanted to do this, this boy band, and it's a cappella, and are you interested? I was like, not really. I'm writing my own music. I want to do my own stuff. Yeah. But he got me because he was like, I think you should still come, because through the whole auditioning process and everything, you can pitch your own music to the guys. And then maybe, even if that doesn't work out, you can do your own. Yeah. Maybe they're interested in doing something with you. So we all met up in Berlin, I think it was. And, I had to perform this one song. Like, we recorded a little demo and stuff. And in the end, I got a phone call. They were like, yeah, they want to do it. They want to do it. We kind of want you as the lead. And then there were 4 other guys. And I really didn't know what to say. I was super nervous, and I knew I didn't want to do it, but at the same time, that was the closest. It's interesting. It was an interesting experience to be offered this thing that you don't want, but it's also, that other people would want it. Yeah. So you suddenly doubt yourself of just saying no to it, because I could have potentially, made a bunch of money, and maybe other opportunities would arise. But I did turn it down in the end. And then they told me that basically that's now the whole thing falls apart because I didn't say yes. And I never heard from them again, and heard another weird story months later that they never called some other people back, even though they told them it's going to happen. So it was fishy and weird, and I'm very glad it didn't happen. But that was one of the experiences, in general, unfortunately, the business is, it's a lot about money. It's not really about music. And being an English-speaking singer-songwriter in Germany is generally tricky when it comes to, trying to be successful, because there's not really a market and an audience for that kind of stuff. I mentioned earlier that there's phases in Germany where English or German is kind of the main language in music. And for the last 15, 20 years, German really has been the language that everyone switched back to. So a lot of artists were already somewhat famous and they sang in English, and then German just became this trend. So all the English-speaking German artists transitioned into also speaking German, which I also find, it's interesting. It's, I guess you can do it, but you don't hear that a lot with American artists that, they sing in English and then they transition into singing in French or something. Right, it's kind of weird because it sounds different. Everything's different. But it was so dictated by the business that that's the thing to do now. That I got that a lot. Like, well, if you sang in German, then maybe we could offer you something. And I never wanted to do that because, I explained how I feel about English. And so it's kind of tricky there. And that's why I ended up just finding a small label in the UK because they're fine. They like it. They try to support me the way they can. And I'm kind of glad that I'm not working with anyone in Germany.
Yeah, it seems like you were facing a lot of pressure to do something, and it was pushing against who you felt you were as an artist and what you wanted to do. So, I think it's great to stick by what you feel is right for you. And that's honestly kind of the best way to go, because you can look back on it and be like, well, I don't regret that because I did what was best for me. And, however it turns out is how it turns out. But
exactly.
I chose my own path. So in the US, there are several different types of record deals. There's PPD, SLRP, profit split, label services, etc. Do you know what are some common types of deals that are in Europe, like major label deals?
Well, major label deals are usually differently than indie label deals. But there's, to be honest, I'm not sure if I can give you all the information that would be interesting from a European perspective. I know that it used to be the case that you would get a very small portion of the actual profit, would be like 80-20 or 90-10 or something, in favor for the label. But then you would get quite a big sum of money up front if you sign the deal, and then that's how they recoup over time. You don't really see a lot of money for a while, but those times have kind of, I mean, maybe some major labels still do that, but it's definitely changed more to profit split scenario in most of the cases, as far as I know, and especially in the indie label world. It is, it's a lot of time it's 50-50 profit split.
Just from the program that I was in, we learned that indie labels seem to be way more favor the artist and cater to the artist or the musician or songwriter, and they care more about who they're signing. Definitely if you're comparing it to like a major label is more money hungry.
Yeah, I think you're working more together with the label if in the indie world. Obviously, the downside is they don't really have a lot of money.
Right.
So they can't really push you as much. They can't really support you as much. And there's often no advance at all. So you kind of go on a journey together.
Right.
And both parties just put in what they can put in. But there's no money for anyone in the beginning, and then you're basically you're partnering up and trying together to do something. Whereas with a major label, they really have the money, they're sitting on the money, and then they decide to either use you to make more or not. So it's a very different approach. I wonder sometimes what kind of major label deal I would have even said yes to, if at all.
Right. I guess there are pros and cons to both sides, like everything in life. So this is part of the interview where I want to dissect one of your songs.
Cool.
So your top listed song on Spotify is called Fire. Can you tell me about what the inspiration was behind writing this song?
Oh yeah, maybe that can be another hint on how we know each other.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So, well, the song was inspired by a person that you know very well.
Yes, I do.
And I had met her a couple weeks earlier, I guess, and just I just had to let out my feelings, and it's funny because the very first demo of that song is extremely slow and sad sounding.
Oh, really?
And it's partially because the riff isn't extremely easy to play. You have to stretch your hands quite a bit, and I had just figured it out. So in songwriting, usually your first demos are a little slower just because you haven't practiced as much yet. But then listening to it, it's this very whiny way in which I'm singing, and there's some parts that I then later changed. But it's funny now listening to the produced song, and it's so much more up tempo and just kind of energetic. That's not really how it felt in the beginning. But it's a love song, and it is kind of sad, but at the same time also very full of energy and sparks and this fiery feeling. So. Yeah.
I'm curious, can we hear a little bit of the demo of it?
I do it. I should have it on my phone.
Okay.
But you need to give me a second to
Oh, no, that's totally fine. Yeah. Take your time. This is exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I find that very interesting sometimes going through my old recordings, and then because often when I write something, I record, a voice memo with it just to not forget it. But then usually I don't, because I keep playing it every day, and over days or weeks, it just evolves into the finished song. And what I don't realize sometimes is how much in that time it's still changed from the first voice memo, just by playing it again and again, and every day, like tweaking tiny things subconsciously. And then sometimes when I recorded the song and I go back to the voice memo, I'm like, this is how it started? Oh, and there was this melody that, never made it into the song, or this part. So it can be very interesting to go back, see how it develops. So let's see. Fire, 4th of July. Oh, 4th of July.
Oh, nice.
2016.
Sad boy hours are about to start.
Okay. Let's see. Singing in your room, loving like we feed to strangers, and rolling love to your train. I keep calling in your eyes, but know everyone's a lie, and I know it's true to call in your face.
but I'm fooling in your nose. But I'm dreaming like we froze, and you know I hold and ring to you alone. You're stranded on you try, and your open wide feet sends no ways to go when you're try.
I find that really interesting, hearing the progression of where you start with the song and where you end. The Taylor Swift documentary that she made during COVID and talking about folklore, you got to see the transition of where something started and where it finished. I think it would be so cool if somebody released an album of the same song, but how it changed throughout the process, and you could see like that would just be a really cool idea.
Yeah, and it's also, I think with songs, you definitely sometimes get to a crossroads where you have to decide, am I taking it this way or that way? And I mean, I guess every once in a while, an artist releases a song and they have maybe an alternate version.
Yeah.
But doing that more extreme, you know, like taking this demo and really going down this slow, dark road and fully producing it in that way, and then also going the other way, and then maybe even having another version. I agree. That'd be really, really interesting. And sometimes it's hard to make the decision as a songwriter and producer in the way then, because I did co-produce the EP, to say like, okay, this is probably what's better right now, let's just go with this, and then scrap all the other ideas that still are beautiful, and you maybe think, this could also be cool, but you just have to make decisions. Sometimes you can't have it all. So
I would be at a standstill because I have such a hard time making decisions.
Oof, yeah. Well, deadlines and working with other people helps. I did produce the EP with two friends in Cologne. Actually, back in Cologne. That's funny,
nice.
Even though I didn't live there anymore. That's where I recorded it and produced it. And it helps just having two more opinions in the room, kind of having to have that conversation, but then also just very clearly getting certain feedback of they agree that this is the best, and then you can just like, okay, then I'll trust you. Let's just go with that. And you can always the next day go back, listen to something you did and be like, oh, nope, no, it's really not working. We have to do it again. We have to change it. But I learned that even though it's important to listen to your initial feeling about certain things, sometimes you just need to give it a little bit of time too, because you can be too much in your head at some point. And then, so I've had that with vocal recordings where I wasn't sure if I'm happy with it, and everyone else was like, it sounds wonderful. Like, yeah, we can totally just leave it like that. And then this one thing bothers me, and then I give it a day or two and I listen to it and I'm like, wait, where was the thing that bothered me? I don't hear it anymore. But being by yourself, recording and doing everything by yourself, which now a lot of people do too, I think you have to be very good at making decisions and being disciplined in that way, or you have a hard time really getting stuff finished. Yeah, I feel you. Yeah. I
feel like maybe the only way I can apply it in my situation is when I'm going through and editing an episode of the podcast. After I listen to something enough times, it all starts to sound the same, so I have to go away, take a day, come back, and then re-edit it again. And I think I get to a point where I'm like, I just so want to release this. It's going to sound how it's sounding right now. This is how I want it to sound. I can't edit it or fix anything anymore.
And the thing is, the people usually also are totally fine with it, right? I mean, then you talk to people and they're like, yeah, what bothered you? Like, I love it. It's all good. Like, you know, and you're like, what? No, but this little thing. It's like, yeah, but that's fine, because they're focused on what it's really about, which is what you're saying, what you're talking about, or with music, the song itself, not the recording. And I like that it's coming back a little bit, that artists record also songs in some ways where it just sounds very real again. Like Leif Volbeck is one of my favorite musicians. He's a Canadian singer-songwriter too, I would say. And when you listen to his stuff, it's so full with like someone hitting the piano and it's you know, and then like something's a little offbeat, or it's more like you put a mic in a room and then the band just plays, and whatever it was, you know, singing off key, the backing vocals being a little late, all doesn't matter, we're all just doing it. And I think that's a really nice approach to go back to, because especially now with digital and everything we can do, we're so focused on making everything perfect that you sometimes forget what it's really about. And I think that applies to not just music, to everything. And it's important to go back and realizing what it's really about.
I think that's a really nice way to put it. I think perfectionism, trying to attain that I think you lose the beauty in what being unique is, you know. You guys couldn't see that, but I did like a finger gun at Ingo. Yeah. Okay.
Is that enough?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. It's interesting to hear you talk about that. So when you're sitting down to write a song, like, do you find moments in where you want to write something, like when you have a muse or somebody that you want to sing about, or is your writing process kind of more like you go with the flow with things? Like, when do you think is your best work produced?
When my life is crazy.
Oh, okay.
So, I have to preface that with, for me, songwriting has always been something very personal and almost therapeutic. I never, I mean, even though I had dreams more so as a child of being, you know, famous and on big stages, it was mainly when I needed to go through something, or when I needed to just kind of work on how I'm feeling or just let it out. That's when I would grab my guitar and sing and play. So it's almost like my way of writing a diary.
Nice.
So that's why a lot of my songs are about real things or real feelings that happen to me. I'm not really one that just sits in a chair and thinks of all these worlds and makes things up and then, you know, writes songs about it. I usually has to come from somewhere within me. And that's why, unfortunately, for my output, sometimes it's like the more stable and wonderful and happy my life is, the less I feel like I just need to write something. I need to write about it. And in times where everything's just crazy and I don't know what's going on and I'm, you know, emotionally I'm like on a roller coaster, that's when I just write a lot, because I need to have something to hold on to. And so it makes complete sense that this song and a few other songs on that EP that's coming out and in my mind is already released, they all came from a time where it was very intense and I had a lot of different emotions.
Can we talk about your EP a little more? Yeah. So let's talk about it.
What do you want to know?
Yeah. When's it coming out? How many songs are on it? What's your favorite song off it? Maybe I should ask this one at a time, but...
Yeah, no, I can answer all those questions, though. Well, actually, I can't, because the actual date for the EP itself, the release date, is not quite set. So probably by the time you release this interview, maybe you can have a little note, because by then you might know. Right now, it's still not 100% set. But on 17th of June... the third single is going to come out, which is called All Right. And then there's 2 more songs on the EP. So it's 5 songs. We actually recorded 6. One will either be B-side or, you know, released a little bit later independently. We'll see about that. But yeah, it's a 5/6 song EP coming some point after June 17th.
Nice. Do you have a favorite song off of the EP?
Yeah, if I'm completely honest, my favorite song is probably In My Mind.
Okay, yeah, it's a good one. I've listened to it on repeat a couple times. Maybe cried in my room. No,
I just love sad songs. You know, usually my favorite songs of other artists are also the slower, sadder songs.
Would you classify yourself as a sad boy?
Partially, yeah. Yeah, more so than like a super happy, extroverted, crazy positive person all the time. I have both in me, but yeah,
there's like I don't know if it's like a TikTok trend or how it started, I can't remember anymore, but like there's something called Sad Boy Hour where you only listen to like sad songs. And so I don't know, there are people putting guys in categories of like an e-boy, sad boy, or whatever. So I guess I mean in that sense.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know. But I just thought it was funny. Oh shoot, I had another question for that. Oh yeah, can we talk about your music video too? Because you have a really funny story connected to trying to record one or film one. You're talking about in the water. I'm trying to figure out how to...
Yes.
Yeah, can we talk about that? Because that story is just hilarious.
Sure. So for my second single, In My Mind, I wanted to film a very different music video than the one before Fire, because Fire is this one-shot video. It has a very different vibe. It's just a single shot, and I wanted to have a completely different feel. So we decided to go to Denmark in March this year, and it was still very cold. And I had these images of me being by the beach. I wanted the video to be in black and white. And there's also a scene where I'm in the water. And we looked up, the temperatures was like I hope I say this right in Fahrenheit. I think it was around 35 degrees Fahrenheit.
Ooh.
So very cold.
Yeah.
Very cold water. And I had already had to lie on the wet sand for a while, in just a little jacket and everything. So I was all really cold. But for this one scene, I really needed to go into the water. So I got a wetsuit and like shoes that they were waterproof and stuff. So I was actually really surprised once I got in the water that it was totally fine. But then we also needed to lip sync. So the person that connects both of us was also there and holding the Bluetooth speaker just so we could listen to the music. And as I'm in the water and the camera guy is also in the water and we're like shaking and it's pretty tricky. The Bluetooth connection to the speaker just drops because she's too far away because she's on the safe sand, right?
Yeah.
And she's far away. So I just gesture like, just come closer, because from my side, it looked like there was still lots of sand that she could walk through. She had like little like shoes with a higher, what do you call those? Like
Rain boots?
Yeah, rain boots, exactly. So I felt like, you could definitely come closer, but she couldn't hear me. So I just would like wildly gesture like, come. Also, I have to say that we were running out of time because the sun was setting. It had already set. Plus the big battery on the end of the camera was blinking because it was about to die.
No.
So I was just like, just come here.
Yeah.
And she's like, I can't. But I didn't know what she meant. And I didn't really hear her. So at some point she decided, sure, she has to sacrifice and just to come.
Yeah.
And the moment she walks towards me, I realized that the sandbank just dips down again and she's just
Submerged.
totally in water. All the water gushes into her rain boots.
Whoa.
And I see her face. I'm like, ooh, this is bad.
Yeah.
So, but she did it. We actually filmed the shot, and that was the shot we needed. So without that, we couldn't have finished the video. And the camera dies perfectly in time.
Nice.
We all get out, and she can't move her feet anymore because it's like, that was too cold. Yeah.
What was the car ride back? Like,
Sacrifice.
the things you do to make art. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I kind of, had to very carefully rub the little toes, and it all hurt. And luckily, we had I think we had a hot water bottle in the car or something like that.
Just in case.
And the Airbnb where we stayed wasn't too far away, so we could
awesome.
warm up. That was a rough shoot, but so much fun, and I'm so happy with the result.
Yay. You guys check it out. We're going to have links to all of Ingo's music and everything in the description, and we'll talk about where you can hear stuff. He's on Spotify, Apple Music. What else? What other platforms?
Oh, Deezer, Tidal. I think all those streaming platforms, really.
Awesome.
I hope.
Yeah, I looked at. I just can't remember what Amazon Music too. I think or something for Amazon.
Yeah.
I'll link it all below. So
with your whatever your favorite streaming services. Yeah.
Yay! Okay, awesome. This is good. This is very good. You mentioned In My Mind a couple times. Do you want to talk about the songwriting process for that song as well?
Yeah, I always remember writing that song because I was not at home. I was not in my comfortable setting. I didn't even have my guitar with me. I was staying in Düsseldorf, another city in Germany, at the time with a friend, just traveling through. And I might have written a few lines in my lyrics book first with this one, actually. And then I grabbed his guitar and just kind of played around with it, tuned the lowest E string down because I like alternate tunings. A lot of my songs are not in the standard tuning of a guitar. And just played late at night while I think they'd already gone to bed. Just in this place where it wasn't my living room. I was sleeping on the sofa. It wasn't my city. It wasn't my guitar. But I like those moments when everything's a little different and new and it can inspire you. So I remember writing the verse because there are a lot of verses in that song. The chorus is somewhat short, comes in between, and so I would say like a more verse focused song when I talk about songwriting. So I wrote quite a few of those verses right with the music and the lyrics, and they almost stayed exactly the same. It's interesting looking at my lyrics book that I didn't cross out too much. I just changed a few things. But it all came somewhat fluently and quickly, and I like that a lot when that always shows that I'm in a good place and I'm in a flow. And that's not necessary to write a good song, but it's beautiful, and I always appreciate it when it happens to me because it feels like it's almost something else that's happening to me, or like someone else writing the song, because I really don't need to put much work into it. It just happens. Whereas on some parts, then you just sit for days or weeks and try to figure it out, or you
Right.
can't find a line that sounds good and stuff. But this one flowed pretty well.
That's nice.
Mhm.
What made you decide to write most of your songs or play most of your songs not in standard tuning? Like, what was the deciding factor in that?
I think it's like how most art, or maybe a lot of art at least, happens. You get a little bit bored with what you already know. So, at that point when I got into alternate tunings, I'd already played guitar for years and years and years. And I knew all the standard chord shapes and up the neck and whatever. But then at some point it's just repeating itself. And it sounds a little bit, well, it sounds always the same. But I think more so as I'm talking about this right now, I think it's also that I listen to other people and other songs. I'm like, whoa,
That sounds different.
this sounds so cool. And it doesn't sound like my guitar sounds. Like, what's different? And then it's like, oh, it's a different tuning, because it is elementary to how a guitar sounds. Because if the same string is tuned to a different note, even though you could play that note, maybe on a lower string or something, it's still, the whole sound just changed. It's like it's a different instrument. Some people think changing the tuning is just being able to play certain chords that you couldn't play with the standard tuning, but it's really also that you just change the overall sound of the guitar, because when you drop a lot of strings, then it just sounds warmer and richer and has more bass, and it's just very different. Just like when you use a capo and you put it all the way up, it can sound like a little mandolin or something.
Yeah.
And that can be really fun too. And I always loved complex chords. I'm not someone who loves just playing a pure G and a pure D and a pure C, and that's all I use. I love added ninth and seventh and major chords. And there might be a little bit through my jazz background then too, but really a lot of good pop music has a little more rich and complex chords in it. And you can do that in a very nice way with different tunings on the guitar, and it just sounds a lot more interesting. And you can just hold one chord, and it's beautiful. And that's harder to do with a standard tuning.
So this is the lightning round of the interview, and you have to choose between two choices. I give you, let's say, beach or mountains, and then you should say the first thing that comes to mind.
Oh, okay.
Try not to think about it, just do it,
Cool.
Okay. So, you ready?
I'm ready.
Breakfast or dinner?
Breakfast.
Playing in a room by yourself or playing in front of a crowd?
Playing in a room by myself.
Okay. Cheese or sushi?
Sushi.
Those are two very different things. It's just what I thought
But
of.
some people love both.
Yeah.
Or all, yeah.
If it was my granddad, he would say neither.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Ingo or Stahl?
Ingo, because you don't have to weirdly pronounce it. And you can do a lot of funny nicknames.
Nice, I like
I
that.
learned from you.
Yeah, Ingus Pingus. I'm not gonna have that in there. I'll take that out. Ingo Pingo. Okay. Water or fire?
Fire.
Earth or wind?
Isn't wind part of Earth?
Yeah, but they're two separate things.
Oh, okay, the Earth. Okay.
Or
I get
wind.
it. Wind.
Noise or silence?
Silence.
Nice. Those are all the ones I could think of.
Cool.
Yay! I was trying to think of like a really weird one, but nothing came to mind. And I think if I got too weird with it, it would get too weird. So we're just not going to go there. So I wanted to add like a new segment too. It's called Song of the Week. So what's a song that you want to recommend to people to listen to for this week?
It doesn't matter if it's like freshly released or
Totally,
anything.
whatever you want. No rules to it.
Okay. Then Hot Tears by Lee Volbeck, the guy that I just mentioned.
Nice. Everybody check it out. I'll also link that below. And then my suggestion for Song of the Week this week is going to be Watch House, the band Watch House, and the song Little World. Because I've been listening to that a
Nice.
lot recently, and I really like
Gotta
it.
check that out.
Yeah. And I'm going to check out yours. Thank you so much for coming on today's episode, Ingo.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was really fun. I don't think we've ever sat down and talked extensively about your musical career and, your whole process and everything. So this
No,
is really exciting.
why would you? The people now wonder, right? Why
Yeah.
would you guys sit down?
No.
Oh. Yes.
You guys have to check out his stuff. He's awesome. And it's just cool to hear a different, unique perspective that we've not had on this episode. And he's a really cool person. So, as I'm sure you've gathered from listening to this episode. So, thank you guys so much. And thank you for coming on, Ingo. It was a pleasure to have you.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yay! Okay, we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.